People get Machiavelli totally wrong. They say this guy was a scholar or a political scientist or like a philosopher, a worthy philosopher, historic philosopher. But this is all just total invention. Maybe it's like a rationalization because people want to rationalize the fact that they like some of what he says and they do these bad things and they want to say, oh, it's okay. Machiavelli said this is just a part of life. But it doesn't have to be. And Machiavelli was like a kind of a sick guy. I just recently published this book, Machiavelli or the Demonic Confusion, and this is an amazing book. And you can see right here, it talks about how he was kind of demonic. He would flip the Bible on its head and kind of trick people, lure people, bait people into doing these bad things. But what I want to talk about right now is look at Machiavelli's life and just kind of show a few facts from his life that illustrate how he was not a scholar, he was not a political scientist. The guy was a total degenerate. He was a degenerate loser, liar. He's the opposite of what everyone says that he was. Okay. Consider first, this is a letter that Machiavelli himself wrote. He said, "For some time I never say what I believe, and I never believe what I say. And if it sometimes occurs to me that I say the truth, I conceal it among so many lies that it is hard to find out." Okay, that's Machiavelli himself. And he's not advising a ruler or whatever to do that. He's describing himself. That's how he talks. That's how he writes. So when people read The Prince and they're like, "Oh, what a great scholarly work," they're just ignoring Machiavelli's own words, where he says he's a liar and he puts his lies in everything he does. Okay, now let's talk about a part of his life from, this is a biography. I'm going to read a passage from a biography of Machiavelli to really get into this part about how he's a deviant. Okay, he's not a scholar. He's not like a respectable man. He's not a man with integrity. He's not a man you can trust. He's not a man you would want to really talk or be around. So let's take a look at what Machiavelli himself says. This is from another one of Machiavelli's letters, where he has a family, he has a wife, he has kids, but he goes with a hooker, and not just it's not just any hooker. This is like especially degenerate. So he explains how he went into this dark room with some woman he didn't know and couldn't see, and afterwards this is what he writes about what happened. In the middle of her little, wrinkled head, she had a fiery scar that made her seem as if she had been branded at the column in the Mercado. At the end of her each eyelash, towards her eyes, there was a bouquet of lice. One eye looked up and the other down, and one was bigger than the other. The tear ducts were full of rheum, and the edges of her eyelids were mangy. She had a turned-up nose, stuck low down on her head, and one of her nostrils was slit open and full of snot. Her mouth resembled that of Lorenzo de' Medici, but it was twisted on one side, and from that side a bit of drool was oozing, because, since she had no teeth, she couldn't hold back her saliva. On her upper lip, she had a longish but wispy mustache. She had a long, pointed chin that twisted upwards a bit, from which hung a flap of skin that dangled down to the join of her neck. And I stood there, totally bewildered and astonished to behold this monster. She noticed and tried to say, "What's the matter, sir?" But she could not get the words out, because she stuttered, and as soon as she opened her mouth, there issued a breath so smelly that my eyes and nose, the two portals to the most easily offended senses, were assaulted by this stink, and my stomach was so appalled that it was unable to bear such an outrage. It gurgled, and having gurgled, it started to retch, so much that I threw up all over her. Okay, so this is Machiavelli. This is the guy who's respected as a world historic philosopher, who needs to be studied, who professors, business people, everyone says, "Oh, Machiavelli, what a great guy. This guy's a philosopher. He's one of the great minds of history." Just a cursory look at the facts of his life show he's a total degenerate, okay? right, let me tell one other story from his life, which is just to make sure everyone gets to the point about the sort of guy this Machiavelli is. Um, this is another story from Machiavelli's own pen, another letter he wrote to one of his friends, because I don't know, he liked this stuff. He wasn't embarrassed or ashamed about it. This was just a part of his life, and he was, pleased with himself. He told a story about, he said one night it was raining, and then he went into the market, and he couldn't find what he was looking for, and then he started going down all these dark alleys, and eventually he found a boy, because, for a sexual thing he wanted to do with the boy, and afterwards he told this boy, again it was dark, so he said the boy couldn't see his face, and he gave the boy a false name of an acquaintance of his, and he said, "Oh, I don't have any money. Go to my place of work tomorrow, and I'll give you some money." But he gave the boy the wrong name, and he sent the boy to the wrong place. And then, so the next day, the boy, he went to that place of the other person who Machiavelli trolled them into going to, and then they both were like, "Oh wait, you're not the right person. What happened?" And they said, "Oh, I know. It was Machiavelli who put you up to this." So there we have Machiavelli, doing unspeakable things to a boy, and then on top of that, he like lies to the boy, tries to trick him, but everyone knows, and Machiavelli's contemporaries, we think of Machiavelli as a respectable guy, but his contemporaries knew what sort of guy he was, because they knew it was Machiavelli behind this. His contemporaries knew he was a deviant. Let's see. Okay, and let's talk a little bit more about about his integrity, in his work, in his writing. Where's this? 358. So after Machiavelli was thrown out of government, he was desperate to get back in government because he didn't care about the truth or writing these writing worthy documents or things for us to read. His main concern was just having a job in government. He was a bureaucrat or a diplomat, and that was his main concern. So after he lost his job in government, he didn't retire to the countryside to study and just write these philosophical works. He started groveling and trying to get his job back. So he wrote this essay or whatever for the Medicis who were in charge. And this is how his biographer explains the paper that he wrote for the Medicis. Though badly written and crudely argued, the I Paesci showed just how much Niccolo was prepared to sacrifice to earn the Medici's trust. In a few confused paragraphs, he had repudiated everything he had worked for since becoming second chancellor. He had poured scorn on Soderini. That was his boss who he worked for over a decade. Spat on his regime, rejoiced over the destruction of the militia, which was something he spent years trying to create. Even if he had not said so openly, he had silently promised that, in return for his livelihood, he would betray everything and say anything. So, it's in this context that we need to understand his work, The Prince. And when people say it's worthy of study, it might not be pleasant, but it's just the facts, it's the exact opposite of just the facts. Machiavelli wrote The Prince the same time he was writing this I Paesci letter, whatever, where he's begging for his job from the Medicis. He was saying anything, he was saying anything at all, any lies, any awful, absurd things, whatever he could to get his job back. So really, reality is just totally flipped on its head here. The Prince, Machiavelli, not scholarly works, not the work of a scientist at all. Really the works of a deviant liar who's pathetic and just doing anything and all to get his job back. Let's see. I want to read one more page from Machiavelli's, the biography of Machiavelli here, okay? This really speaks to the idea that Oh, was Machiavelli a philosopher? Was he a wise man? Well, this is what his biographer said, and this is kind of a sympathetic biography of him. And this is still what his biographer says. The way he ends the book. It was typical of Machiavelli's dark and irreverent sense of humor, but like so many of his jokes, this last piece of witty badinage concealed a darker and more self-critical message. Tortured though he had been by his sense of failure, it dawned on him that, in striving so ardently after glory, power, and pleasure, he had not only condemned his family to the deepest poverty, but he had also put himself beyond salvation. And while he might have laughed at the good company he was in, one can hear him inwardly shrieking with terror at the pains of hell. So that's Machiavelli, the wise man. As he dies, he's shrieking in terror at the hell he's about to enter. I don't know. It's just kind of amazing that this guy is considered something of a political scientist. But yeah, anyway, so there's some facts about his life. There's a lot more, but that's enough. You get the idea. And if you want more analysis on Machiavelli's writing The Prince, and what sort of evil, degenerate tricks he put in there to kind of trap people into doing demonic things, or his demonic aggression, that's in that book. Check that out, and thank you for listening.